Hey guys, this is Patrick Carl Sattermoon. You might know me as the guy with the most IM medals in the world, and you're watching Duncan Thorin Shields YouTube channel.
One thing that's quite cool is when I ask about the rest of your career, some of the Titans players end up playing with you again, but also, like I said at the beginning, there's players who you then play with for years from now, where much like the core of the Titans, you clearly just stick with the same people even when you make different teams and join different orgs. So the first person I have to bring up, because he was basically like your running partner from here on out, was the player Morfar, who might not be that famous, but he was in all your teams pretty much from this on out. Who is this guy? What was the connection? I know it's all the teams you're in, it's always you and him.
Yeah, Morfar and Excited was two of the key players, and then Paddy. Some people might know him. He was at one point he was called Wonder. He played for Noah in
the early days,
period of time. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Danish Counter-Strike scene is very close knitted. I mean, we all know each other. We had. I guess a Danish gathering channel where we always met up and played. Me, Morfar, Excited, Paddy, Zone, whiMp. I mean, we were a lot of guys playing different games like Dota and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was just good friends of mine, talented players obviously, but no one you would ever pick for a top Danish tier team. But talented players and players we were really comfortable with, and we kind of had, I wouldn't say we necessarily had the exact same mentality in towards how far we want to take these things, but at least a group of guys that we had a lot of fun with and enjoyed our time together. So that's why it keeps persisting. We also brought WIMP back and Zone for H2K and stuff like that. So just good friends, pretty much. That was the start of it, at least.
That makes a lot more sense then, because another question I was going to have in light of what you said earlier is, before this team became H2K the next year and had a good result there too, you guys went to one of the American CPLs when you were AllTheRage. You had some of these players, Morfar, even Drally was in this team actually. But you only came like 13th or something. Is it a hard pill to swallow to go to America and to not even be relevant in winning the tournament and to just go out that early? Is it hard?
Yeah, it is. It is hard, and I was not a happy camper, to say, to put it lightly. I mean, I don't. I mean, obviously, to have some perspective, AllTheRage is not supposed to win a CPL.
No, of course not. Sure.
No, but my mentality is that we play to win. I mean, and obviously, I'm not a naive guy. I know that there's a long way to the top for a team like AllTheRage, but I mean, I'm as I mentioned, I'm not good at losing, and that was also one of the reasons why even with the stuff with AllTheRage and HK, where it was not nearly the same practice schedule. It was far less serious, I guess. I mean, we were a fine team, a good team, but I think the problem for me and Rally and WIMP, I can't remember the roster exactly, but the problem for us was that we had tried success. I mean, so not to be arrogant or anything, but it was hard for me at least to find the motivation to do it all again, and that was a little bit unlucky for Morfar and Excited because they actually deserved a great placement. We got one in ESL in Germany, but I know they wanted a lot more, and I was just not mentally in a state to give it another go. But having a 13th place is not something that I would ever be happy with. And I also feel somewhat lackluster towards the organization that actually provided us with the tickets and covered our expenses.
Was it a bit amateurish?
Yeah, I don't like performing like that. I don't. So that was also why I said that that's not a thing I want to do again.
Right, by the way, seeing as in this era, if I even go look at the teams you played basically all the great AWPers of this era. So as an AWPer, look, I know you're going off memory, so it's going to be like what do you remember from a game or feel of a player. We're not asking you to be super specific. But if I was to read out this list of names, like Kogu from MIBR, Frod from Complexity, Valet from Spixel, if people remember, Shagwa was obviously in Team 3. These are like, if you make a frag movie of AWPers, it's going to be all these guys, right? You were a top AWPer, you were a confident player. Were these players, like, were any of these players overrated? Were they actually as good as advertised? Were you as good as them? What do you think?
Again, not to be arrogant, I would put myself up against any of the AWPers in my prime days, but I think all of those guys are great AWPers. There was Miller also from
K-Sharp,
before.
Sure.
There was you mentioned Valle. There was Sonic as well was an AWPer way back when. There was a lot of tough competition. I think Kogu was one of them. I think Markelov was the Russian guy, also a great AWPer. Valle, great AWPer as well. There's another Swedish Wilden, I think he was called. So there was a lot of tough competition within the AWPing game. I think it was fairly close in the top. I mean, as I said, the game was more stationary, so it's about hitting your shots. I mean, I've never been a flashy AWP like, let's say, if you want to compare someone like what's this French player?
Kenny S. Kenny S.
No, Kenny S. Yeah.
Yes.
So where, not to take anything away from Kenny S, but I mean, when it needs to look that flashy, you'll miss some of the shots.
Of course,
I mean, you don't. Being an AWPer is about hitting the correct shots, and that's always been for me. I mean, I don't need to look flashy, and it wasn't a flashy game back then. So it was about being consistent with the AWP, hitting your shots, knowing your timings, knowing your angles. I think they were great AWPers, all of them. And it was. So pretty much on some of the maps, you would know even before the match started that you will have an AWP off, because that was the position. It was not as flexible today, so you kind of knew, okay, this guy will be either here or there. So there's pretty much those two options, and then you'll have to decide: do I want to take this one-on-one with him, or do I want to approach it another way? And I would always be taking the one-on-ones. Because that's the mentality I believe you need to approach the game with. So I said it again in the Danish. So today's he doesn't play anymore, but Simple was one of the most feared players with the AWP some time ago. If you approach the game thinking I most likely won't win this battle, then you would most likely not win the battle. So if that's your approach to the game, you should probably not be playing the game. That's my mentality, at least when this is my primary thing. No,
I know one thing you mean. I've got a follow-on question about that, which is that's why it's so interesting you were the in-game leader and the primary AWPer, because people will know that's a role that's even to this day very rarely done. Like actually people like karrigan and James, they're kind of rare that they do that. In fact, one of the reasons why I bring this up though is even though it's not a role people associate with the AWPer, because they think of the AWPer as like a star player who often doesn't think about this and team's just watching his crosshair like that. I actually think that what they're missing is what you just alluded to, is they're thinking of a star player AWPer. The star player AWPer is the guy who tends to take it like Kenny S, take a million peaks and try and get the amazing 5k when they all rush his position. But like the way you were using it is a way that, as those people I just referenced, that James and karrigan, you can use the AWP very tactically though. Like notice the difference is that you stressed it there. Whereas maybe like a superstar AWPer just goes for every shot because he can hit every shot. He's trying to get just the frags. To me, the in-game leader AWPers, like you said, it's all about like, how do you use this weapon tactically? Like I can lock off a spot here, no one can pass this angle. Or like you said, it's more about consistency, isn't it? I've got to hit the 7 out of 10 level shot every time on that guy. So my teammate playing knows there's one less person, or he can watch this angle. Like you can use the AWP tactically as well. It's not just a flashy weapon, right?
No, I believe first and foremost it's a tactical one. So again, comparing with the Titans, we had positions that required me to hit the shot. If I did not hit the shot, it would cost 2 guys. So I mean, that's why I'm speaking about consistency, because you also see it in today's CS. Now they regulated it to MR12 again. I mean, it's an expensive weapon to be purchasing for. Is it still 4750? I mean, so if you are not consistent with the AWP, it takes a lot of shots to kind of get the return of investment on an AWP, and that's why it's not being used quite as much as it has been. But I mean, it's fine if you. So there are passive players, passive AWPers, and there are aggressive AWPers. I believe you need to be able to do some of both. So if you're playing terrorist side, you cannot just simply stand and wait for some weird shot, someone walking across your crosshair. You need to approach the game a different way. If you're playing on CT side, then you need to be a stationary AWPer. You do not need to make a lot of movement and flashy plays. You just need to hit that one shot. That's about all you have to do, and then you just need to be consistent with it. So basically just hitting every shot. So when I see also in today's CS, when I see people using like that, they have a millimeter to react upon, where I'm just thinking you will never hit that shot. It's an impossible shot. So why are you taking that angle? You cannot win this duel. I mean, you might be able to spot a guy crossing, and that's fine, but why would you take such a position? Why don't you just allow yourself a millimeter or two more and then actually just hitting the shot? So, to be quite frank, I hate the flashiness of the AWP. It's disruptive to what the purpose is, basically. And obviously, that once in a lifetime where you make something amazing, then, yeah, congratulations.
Sure.
Go back, watch all the demos, and see how many times you've tried that where it failed, instead of just doing standardized stuff. I mean, so I'm a bit old-fashioned like that. I want AWPers to hit their shots. That's about it.
Yes. I saw when this lineup, it was basically the same core, became H2K, which is when the good results became. One of the early ones was you went to a Dreamhack winter, and in the final you actually played NIP, who, if people remember at the time, was like the best team. Actually, it was the one with Spawn and Valley, and it was a mega lineup, if people remember. Like in this era, like you say, you weren't like 100% going like you weren't living to win CS games. But when you play great teams like that, like were they a really good team? Was it actually a competitive game? Do you think?
No, I think that they kind of had our numbers in the final. I mean, we were a little bit outclassed there. I mean, I think it was also at their prime, I think.
Yes.
No, we were outgunned in that fight. I mean, we had a good run at it, and we faced also some great teams in Sweden where we got tested a little bit, but they were too much of a mouthful for us on both individually, tactically. I mean, we just couldn't hit our shots against these guys. That they were better than us. So, but it is also. I mean, I think on paper they need to win most of the times, but they're also facing a squad that doesn't nearly put as much time into it as they most likely do. So if again, as I said, we were fairly aligned within the team on how much time we want to put into this, and we all obviously had some experience from other prior top teams, and we had more Fine Exciter who were great Danish players or so. And as I said in the beginning, every team can beat every team on any given day. I mean, but foundation beats randomness most of the time. So they just had a better foundation than we did. So it was not much of a final. They had a pretty easy run at us. I think we played Train, which was a somewhat close match. Then we met them on, I believe it was Nuke, where we kind of got stomped. So yeah, it was something like that.
I want to ask you a question that goes like this. I've often actually asked it the other way around, which is, if people don't know, it's a really famous stereotype that Danish CS is like structured. Like, it's almost like the analogy I often give is, if people think about how people think about how Germans play football, it's more about the team structure than it is like a star player, isn't it? Like, that's just, everyone knows the German national team's always like that. Whereas if people want the analogy, Sweden was more like, I don't know, how Brazilians play football. You know, like, it's all superstar players, and there's no way they practice some of that shit. They're obviously just doing some magical shit they just just thought of this moment. And if you ever talk to them, KK, the crazy thing is, as you can imagine, both camps think their way is superior. So if I talk to Swedes, they all think it's like, well, why would I want someone telling me what to do? Like, I'm a genius. I know I'm the best player. Like, give me room and let me play. Meanwhile, those Danes are all like fucking nerds watching demos. Like, that's not CS. Meanwhile, if I talk to the Danes, their whole thing's like, look, without the structure, how are you going to like get reliable results, and how are you going to understand that it makes sense and stuff? What did you think of Swedish teams? Because when I talk about teams like SK, NIP, they basically were just like all-star teams back then. They should just get like the best aimers and just put them in one team and sort of go for it. And so I always wondered, what did Danes think of this style?
I think that there's a huge difference between the mentality within Sweden and Danish Counter-Strike. I am saying one of them is better. I'm obviously saying Danish Counter-Strike is better, but I mean, I think Sweden had more top level players than Denmark had, and I think they you also see it within the teams today. So you can see some of them are very structured, and some of them kind of has two players that can go off on their own and kind of try and pull a round or two. Obviously, a lot has changed with today's Counter-Strike, but I think back then they had some top level players that we could probably not compete with on a individual level.
Sure.
But I believe I think that before 2004, the Swedes had the upper hand, but I believe that from going on 2004 and basically a long period, I don't have the exact numbers, but let's say a 10 or even 15-year period, I think if you compare Danish teams to Swedish teams, you would see better results on the Danish side, and I believe that's due to structure. I mean, I'm fine with having you can have levels of structure, but and I'm not saying I have the perfect recipe or had the perfect recipe, because obviously the game has changed quite a lot, but I do believe in structure before, and it wasn't like in the Titans that we didn't use the structure to enhance the possibility of some of the key players to kind of deliver some amazing shots. So obviously I'm not putting, just to set up an example, I'm not putting Eras in an aiming situation.
Sure.
I'm putting either whiMp or Drali in an aiming situation. So it's not like we don't play to people's strengths. I'm just not telling whiMp, okay, you can just rush out long and see if you get three people or just simply die, because that I don't believe that's how stuff works. You see now it's also depending on the spawns and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different timings in today's Counter-Strike that kind of allows a different set of ground rules for tactics. But again, I think that the results pretty much speak for themselves. I do believe the Swedes eventually got more into the structured part of Counter-Strike, but they were just top level players, and that brought them fairly far in a long period of time.
Right, let's talk, because the other big result people might remember is this HK one, where the first ever Intel Extreme Masters. Right, I have to set up this context so people won't get this. If people go back now on like Wikipedia and they look this up like a nerd, when they see the roster, because these aren't like the most famous Danish players, they're going to go like, oh, must have been a fluke. Like, how did this team come second? But if I give this context, it's actually the other way around. Like, in this tournament, when you got to the playoff part, you guys beat Pentagram, which was Neo and Taz, those guys that won all the... By the way, they win this event at the end, obviously. Then in the upper bracket final, you beat Fnatic, who was one of the best teams and had like Forest and did all those mega players, DSN and Car. Everyone remembers like one of the most legendary teams ever. And it was in the final that Pentagram came back and beat you guys. And if people don't remember, one of the famous things about that Pentagram team is they were just kind of like a really clutch team. Like in the big pressure matches, actually, when they sort of like were usually better than they were in other matches. So like if I'm in your position there, KK, it's actually the opposite of what I just said. A fan might think, oh, you guys like had a good run. Oh, second's pretty good. Dude, if I win the upper bracket and I'm in the final and I already beat the team, I've got to think, like you said earlier, I've got to think I'm winning this tournament. I'm supposed to, even though it's maybe not my best team ever, HUK is supposed to win this tournament, right?
Yeah, I believe we were. I think the nerves got to the team. I mean, it was a bit of a weird. It was a great tournament. It was a weird setting. So there was a big technology mass in Germany called, I believe it was called CeBIT or something like that.
It's the one in Hanover. Yeah.
Basically, when we faced some of the teams, so we faced SK Gaming also. We faced
Meet Your Makers from Norway, Logitech from Finland. Yeah, all good teams.
Fnatic. So we were kind of placed so if we were here. Let's see if I can find the cam. They were just pretty much right next to us on the opposite side. So and Scandinavian language like Danish, Norwegian, Swedish has some resemblance to one another. So we can.
Oh, you could hear the comms.
So no, we couldn't hear the comms, but I mean, we shouted a lot.
Oh, you could shout to each other, right?
Yeah, so you could kind of affect the other team a little bit. I believe that had some say in it, but we just really found our stride in that tournament. I mean, people played great. We was probably not playing as much as the other team participating, but we just hit our stride in that tournament. It was me, it was whiMp, it was Zone, it was Morfar and Excited, I believe.
I believe it was Paddy, but yeah.
No, because they were attending us. No, it was not Paddy.
Oh, fair enough.
Noah was attending as well with Paddy.
Maybe someone listed it wrong. It's all good.
Oh, I'm quite sure because there's a YouTube.
It's all good.
There's a YouTube video actually of the match against Fnatic.
Right.
So, just really hitting our stride and playing good, solid Counter-Strike. But in the end, I mean, their experience and their experience on a final stage probably beat us in that sense. So. They didn't really have a tough final, unfortunately, against us. But funny story around that, going back to the Wild West of days, we actually never got the
even though it's from ESL and fucking Intel, you never got the money.
No. ESL paid them. However, our manager did not.
Oh, he stole it. Right.
He stole it.
Fucking hell. That's brutal.
I think it was 20,000.
It'd be quite a good amount of money, Second place is pretty good,
So that was another tick on the box on the Wild West side of things in Counter-Strike. But I think that was our last run as a team in 2007, something like that. And then we might have had some.
You had the odd event, but they weren't good placings.
No.
All right, let me ask you this: since obviously in not only this tournament, you also played them sometimes later. You played this Polish team a few times, right? Everyone knows the name from that team. Everyone knows is Neo. Obviously, some people think he's the greatest 1.6 player ever. What did you think of him? Was he impressive?
Yeah, he was very. I know him a little bit. Met him at numerous events. He's a great player. He was not I mean, obviously he's a mechanical, but you wouldn't define him as a mechanical player in that sense. He was just an all-around, really, really, really great player. Always getting his clutches in, multiple fragging. Not that is solely based on frags, but always on the top of the scoreboard. So he was a phenomenal player. I faced off against him many times, but I believe the whole team was actually quite a fearsome team, and they won a lot in that era. The Pentagram team, they had, what's it called, Luke, Taz, Neo, Cuban,
Lord
B, just a phenomenal team, structured team. So again, as I said, on paper, H2K should never beat, but that's the lovely thing about Counter-Strike. It doesn't always go as the paper might indicate, and I think that's the factor that keeps the game alive. So that's why there is a random factor in Counter-Strike, that you can't just simply. So strategy doesn't always win, but it should win most of the time. That's about it.
What would you say about the player? As we pointed out, he wasn't a Titans player, but he was in this later team. Zone. Who was Zone?
Zone was basically one of whiMP's childhood mates.
Wow. Right.
So they grew up in the same city. He was on some fairly big Danish teams, but once he got into, I think it was H2K. He joined us in, or was he?
No, I think it was in H2K. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was in H2K. Yeah. So we brought him in. He was just a mechanically gifted player, just really an aim kit, like no one. Just pretty much as whiMp was back in the day. Just he had a little bit more to learn than whiMp had, but just a really sound mechanical player. So we brought him in for the kills, pretty much.
Right.
So some of us other folks were getting a little bit older, so we needed some new blood and some new talent. I still speak to him to this day. So he was a great player. But if so, looking at the H2K, so we had whiMp, and the funny thing with whiMp is he was not as much as a mechanical player anymore, as he was probably more of a strategist.
Yes.
Where Zone was probably a mechanical alongside with Morfar, and then we had me as AWPing, and we had the Excited as kind of the anchor on some of the tough sides. So. Funny enough, it was a little bit resemblance to the Titans, just with some different players, but the approach was still the same, but just with a fresh take on the strategies, obviously. But it was the same mentality, and just I think one of the reasons also why we perhaps overperformed a little bit was that we got along very well as individuals. We had fun every time we were on the trip together, and obviously good players as well. But yeah, in the final, I mean, we beat Fnatic, which was loving experience. Also, it was nice for me to give, not to give. That sounds a little bit arrogant, but that Morfar and Excited got to experience victories like that. I'm happy for them in that sense. Because they had a hunger for it, and even though we didn't win in the finals, it was still a great run in one of our last tournaments.
Since one of the last real teams you were in was that Gravitas Gaming lineup, which was it was a couple of players from this team, but it was a slightly different set of players. And there were other people that I saw you kept even playing with at LANs later when you weren't even playing pro anymore. Can I ask about a few of these players? Because these are other people that were around this LAN circuit that you knew well. So the player Fargan, who, by the way, obviously in Danish it means something different, but that name will never look good to Westerners. It just looks bad is all. But anyway, everyone gets it. And then if people don't know, at one point you even actually played with early karrigan, but so obviously wasn't karrigan the in-game lead like they think of now. Can you give me some thoughts on these players? These were known players. Who were these guys to you back then?
Oh, it is the karrigan from now.
No, I mean he's not like an IGL. Like now he's known as a mastermind in-game leader. Back then he was kind of like a fragger, right? He was like an AWPer as well and stuff. So I meant in the figurative sense, Yeah,
I understand. So I had. So the way it went was that Gravitas Gaming contacted me if I had any interest in starting a team again. And we've pretty much just broken up with, I can't remember if we were called H2K or we had another name.
I think you were called temporarily the Clan because you just weren't at H2K anymore. Something weird like that, right? Something like that, I think.
Yeah. And then the way I remember it, we had a talk, or I had some talks with some of the guys, but most of the guys kind of stepped down from Counter-Strike. So I had also some discussions with myself if I wanted to give it one last go, and these Gravitas guys was just really a sound couple of guys who wanted to invest into Counter-Strike and wanted to invest into me, and I was so I decided to go along with it and try again. Put together a team, switched out some people. We never really got the results I hoped for, but going back, I most likely I should just have stopped at that point because I never really found that motivation as I had in the Titans, to be quite honest. I wanted to compete. I love competing, but I hate losing even more. So it was most likely not the best decision. I had great times with the different rosters within Gravitas, but I don't think we ever fully achieved anything of yeah.
Let me ask you this way then, because normally when people, especially in this era when there wasn't much money, normally most people to be in esports had to be going like 100% in it. Like they had to live and breathe the game and hope you get a chance. In your scenario, it almost sounds like that famous trope from American Hollywood movies where, you know, the retired FBI cop is out in his wood cabin and then the chopper comes out. You have to come back for one last job when Mendoza's back. It sounds like people keep trying to like bring you out of retirement. Did in the Danish scene, do you think you had good status? Like people thought, like if we bring this guy, we're gonna have a good team or something. Did you have a special rep? Do you feel like?
Yeah, I think I did. I was also the captain of the national team in Denmark. I mean, yeah, I think I had a good rep in Denmark. Probably also I also had that in Sweden and perhaps also some other places. But I think one of the key factors for me is probably that I was an in-game leader alongside with an AWPer that you didn't really find that much.
Sure.
So I believe that played to one of my strengths. And then I've had some good results, and I think the H2K thing where people look at a lineup where they barely know any other players besides me and whiMp, that if we can beat top level competition like we did in Germany, then it's not all about the players, at least, which was a tendency at that point in time. People tried to just bring in some of the huge fraggers and create teams, and all of them struggle because you can't have 5 egos running around shooting on the server. So yeah, I had one last run at it. Don't really regret it, but regret the results a little bit. Yeah, had some good times. Also got Paddy in WIMP zone again. So as you mentioned, some of the same rosters from previous teams. Yeah, and we've always had a great time together. So I actually started, I believe, or I can't remember if I finished with it, but in the end, I brought in like karrigan, I brought in fragging, I brought in a guy called Nuki, Bardi. So some of the top performers on the Danish scene, fairly unknown players. Some of them obviously not karrigan and fragging. Most people know about them, but the other guys. So we kind of tried to do a redo with some fresh talent, and we had some okay results. But I think for me personally, I've never really found the same motivation. That was quite sad for the other guys because they probably deserved a solid run because they invested some more time into it than I most likely did.
By the way, I want to get your take on this because normally whenever someone like becomes a good player later or changes role, people are always like, yeah, I could see that happening. I have to say, I was around at this time, bro. I went to some of these events. I've seen karrigan when he played for later teams in 1.6 and he was like a star player and an AWPer. And I can tell you, bro, if you'd asked me, like gone to my head, like which of these players will become an in-game leader? Dude, he'd be at the bottom of the list, not at the top.
Yeah.
Like he was even a really annoying person. Like he used to do that thing with a fucking football rattle. Yeah. He used to be shouting at people. Even his style of play was really like, he was mega aggressive, go for every AWP shot. Like, I would never think this guy would become like the greatest in-game leader. Is it crazy to you to think of what he became now?
Yeah, I think I would never have imagined him being an in-game leader either. I mean, he played for Fnatic as well, AWPing for Fnatic, and he was a flashy AWPer.
Sure.
He was a great player and individually talented player, but I mean, comparing to him now, he's a totally different beast because he has the tactical approach. He didn't have that as much. When I knew about him, and he was an AWPer, he's not an AWPer anymore because apparently a lot of stuff changed for him, and but he has my utmost respect. I mean, he's one of the guys who's had the longest career within the Counter-Strike and still performing. I mean, that's quite quite fascinating. I mean, I think it also has to do with age. I mean, the competition today is more fierce than when we played, no doubt about that. And the professionalism around Counter-Strike is something I haven't ever experienced like that. You have mental coach, you have nutrition coach, you have all types of stuff. You play on a set schema. I mean, they have a whole other foundation to succeed than we most likely had in the times. But the fact that he's still playing top level, and it is top level Counter-Strike, and still performing. I mean, he's even putting up some numbers in some of the events. I mean, that is quite impressive. And kudos to him. Yeah.
One thing I would ask you is this, since, as you said, one thing that's a bit confusing is, you said earlier that thing about, like, if you do something, essentially in English what you'd say is, if you do something, you're all the way in. You don't go halfway and then go, oh, you know, I'll just accept okay results. If you do something, you want to be going full on and try and get to number one, like you said, right? So one thing that might confuse people is, even when you stop being in pro teams, there's still years where you still go to LANs. Like when they had those slap LANs, you would go with the mixed team of people. And these were good players. It's not like you were here's the thing, when I say mixed team, I don't mean you were coming last place with the bad players. You'd be playing with like the top players in this era. So are you someone where even when you weren't pro, you still played CS? Would you not play in between the LANs? How active were you in the latter years?
I mean, I played some, but not as much anymore. But I still play Counter-Strike today. So for me, it's still a hobby, and luckily with age, I found a level where I can kind of have fun with it and play with some of the guys. But it goes back to the same thing. The community within Denmark, or at least within the top of Denmark Counter-Strike, at least when I played, is that we're friends before. We're not online friends. We're actual friends. So, if you ask me to go to a Counter-Strike competition today, I would probably go if the time allowed it. So it's more of a hobby. I love competing. I love playing Counter-Strike. I still do to this day. But I love seeing my friends, and we just have a great time at these events. So yeah. Even though I stopped with pro-level Counter-Strike play, I didn't stop playing Counter-Strike. We still played in the evenings. We still had fun together. It was just not nearly as much as when I played pro. So I still loved going to local competitions in Denmark. I still loved, and obviously I didn't go to lose. So we put together a roster, and we might even have played a few matches before we attended. So. It was not like I didn't want the professional competition anymore. I just didn't. I didn't have the time to pursue it in the same way as I previously did.
I mean, the cool thing is some of these LANs you went to, you actually fucked around and beat the actual pro teams at some of these LANs.
Yeah, we did, and I know it for myself, because there's nothing worse than meeting a mixed team of solid players.
Sure.
You can't prepare for them. You know their play style individually, but you can't really use that for that much. So there's nothing worse than losing to one of these, especially not when we know each other so well.
Right.
So that was one of my biggest fears when we have an established team, meeting some of these random folks that we know from Denmark. Or from Sweden, because there was also a Swedish player participating in the Danish event. We beat some of the great teams. We even beat MTV at one point before they became at one of the events. We just had great times together, really great times. And I know it's a little bit contradictory to say saying that I'm a competitive person. I want to place first each and every time, but there's a balance in between that where you can still have some fun with it. So for me, it's a matter of, if I go all the way, I want to win all the time. I can still participate. So for example, in the clan, H2K, Gravitas Gaming, I wouldn't say that I'm okay getting a 5th place, but I would rather have competition in my life than not having any competition at all. And then also having some sort of realistic view towards it. Are we supposed to beat the top teams? No, we are not. But if we do, then great. If we don't, then fine. So that's kind of my approach to it. Still is today, pretty much.
I saw at one of these LANs you got to play with, and obviously you played against him at these LANs, a young Trace when he was on the way up to becoming like a really sick player. Like, can you give me some thoughts on this player? I know people will think that's outside of your era, but actually there's a bit of overlap.
No, because I played with him a couple of days ago,
Oh,
actually.
right.
No, I still know him. Yeah, he was a great. Eventually, would be one of the top players of his era. But yeah, this was in, I wouldn't say early days, probably like mid days for his career. And yeah, we met him at. I can't remember. It was a Danish
I think it
LAN.
was Slap Live, one of those ones.
It was Slap Live, yeah, yeah. Where I think we were me, whiMp, Zone, Paddy, some people like
Yeah.
that, and a guy called Sydfjord, unknown Danish player, but close friend of ours. Yeah, we met them. I mean, obviously they were the huge favorites, and Trace and some of the other guys were considered top tier players in the international scenes as well. So obviously that was a bump on the road that they lost to us, but I mean they got on to greater things, and obviously Trace had a great career. Eventually became part of Fnatic as well, and MTV and stuff like that. Was he in Noah as well? I can't even remember, but yeah. Again, kind of switched a little bit back and forth with the top Danish teams. So I've also competed against Sonic numerous times on different teams, and yeah, so we won in an era, they won in an era, and they continued on, and we kind of step out of the game a little bit, or at least didn't take it as serious anymore as they did. But still had a great time.
Along those lines, I'm sure a modern fan will think I'm going to draw the comparison to Astralis and CSGO, but I'm not. What I'm going to draw the comparison to is if people look around the time you stopped seriously trying to compete, was actually around the time that they made the mTw team you're talking about with Ave and Zonic and Sunder and whiMp. Obviously, your old mate whiMp was there. And in many ways, to me, as an outsider, to you, I imagine this must have been pretty cool because not only did they become number one, they did it doing tactical CS, and even whiMp himself was like a role player in this team. Was it kind of satisfying to see a Danish team become number one?
Yeah, after some time, because they were our last competition when I stopped playing.
Sure.
So we had a little bit of a rivalry on Danish grounds, and they got the best of us in the most occasions, but they also put some more effort into it. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see their careers, and a guy like Abe had a strategic approach to the game. First and foremost, they had a lot of great players, and Sonic, HPX, and Abe obviously, whiMp, Paddy was in the team as well. MJE, and there were some other people. So I believe the star team was MJE, Ave, Sonic, Sunde, whiMp.
Yeah, that was the original one. Yeah. Trace came later. Yeah.
And then Trace, and then whiMp stepped out of it at some point, and Trace came. So yeah, glad to see the Danish Counter-Strike still prevailed. As I said, I think that we, again, going back to the Danish community, we kind of force hard competitors out of each other. So the scene is tough in Denmark. So you have to put in the hours, you have to put in the effort if you want to win. So I think that is also a part of at least back in that era. The reason why some of us became successful is that on a national level we had competition as well. And with the MTV team, which was switching a little bit back and forth, we had close games with them as well. So they needed to keep themselves sharp in order for them to beat us, and then eventually that, I hope, improved them towards other teams. So very glad to see that they had a solid career and a lot of years running on winning terms.
By the way, like I said, even in these later years, if you went to the tournaments with the mixed teams, the Danish team, you'd often be playing with like top players like Trace or like karrigan, etc., like good players who obviously can be in the best teams in the world, right? Was there ever a universe where you could have been at mTw? Was that ever on the table?
No, I don't think so, because my career was ending at the time where they and we also came from a little bit of different groups within Denmark. I mean,
Right.
I had some rosters that I kind of tended to, and they had some guys that they used. So, but I think again, I do believe that if I wanted to give it a go, yeah, I'm that naive. Even if I gave it a go today, I could be somewhat of a
Right.
player still.
Okay.
But at least back in the day, I believe if I gave it all I had, I would be a top player. And then perhaps, but I didn't. I couldn't commit to that. I simply
Right.
didn't have it in me anymore, and it kind of it nags me a little bit because looking into what CS has become. It still cripples a little bit in the fingers when I look at tournaments and.
Well, like we said about
karrigan,
karrigan, bro, the fact karrigan's like 33 and still playing makes you think like I could be playing now. Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, I'm 38, so I think my time is done. But
maybe 10 years ago though, you know, you could have still been doing CS:GO, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I think that I mean when I stopped at least. Well, no, not when I stopped, but there was a point in Counter-Strike's history where the game was pretty much dead.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, it kind of turned around. And
yes.
Money became came flooding in, and I don't exactly know what happened, but I'm very happy that Counter-Strike is at this stage today because I've always believed that Counter-Strike is one of the most strategic games that you can play. That there are so many factors that plays into it. That it is a game of chess, and it's an advanced game of chess.
Yes.
And even more so today with the analyzing teams behind the teams, and I mean, so it's always been competitive, and yeah, I as I said, I still enjoy it today. I still play a little bit. I especially watch it. But I think going back to your question, the MTV. My time was done before that even started. We just had some domestic competition with them just for the fun of it, pretty much. Yeah.
And then along similar lines, one thing I've found, especially in esports, is that typically if people come in esports to a crossroads of like, I can stay with what I've got, or I can gamble on something else, like join another team, play with a different player. I actually find most people tend to do the latter. They go for the gamble because the logic, this is the philosophy a lot of them will explain. They'll often say the reason why you go for the gamble is because you don't want to years later think, oh, what if I'd done that? You want to know like, oh, it either worked or it didn't. So in a way, it sort of like gives you like a satisfying sense, right? Meanwhile, you can see the obvious follow-on thought is if you'd have stayed and you sort of stuck with what you have, you might think, oh, what if I had taken that offer, or what if I had played with him, or I'd left this guy behind, you know, who maybe wasn't good enough. As I said at the beginning of the interview, in your career, you clearly took the former approach. You kind of stayed put. You were the leader even. You built teams around yourself. People came and went. You just stayed. Even in years later, you have the same sort of cores of players, the same 3 or 4 names you notice in this interview pop up again and again. Even if it's a mixed team, if it's a real team, it's a pro team, you're playing with the same groups of people as, like you said, your circle of people, not the MTW people, not the karrigans of the world, except for later on. Do you ever look back and think, not that you would choose this as instead of what happened in your career, but do you ever wonder what if I had tried to be more of like a mercenary and just gone to any big team? Like maybe you could have gone to a Swedish team, or you could have gone to. Do you ever wonder what if?
Well, I've had offers both on Swedish and American teams, and
any good ones you can tell us? Is there any like? Surely it doesn't matter now if you say. Can you say now who they were?
Well, I don't really know what they were called, but they were putting together a top tier Swedish team within the ranks of SK or NIP, where I got offered a position.
Okay.
Yeah, but and the American, I can't remember the name because.
What were the players? Tell me like a player. Maybe I can remember.
I can't even remember. It was some of the 3D guys, and then there was another team. What they called Adrenaline or something like that.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah, I can't quite remember, but there were some offers on the table, huge offers, at least from what I was earning on even in the Titans.
Sure.
So, but for me, I mean, going back, I would have liked to give the Swedish one a go if I could do it all over again, because that was actually in between teams, so I wouldn't be leaving anyone behind. But I was in the midst of creating a team, and yeah, I just again I found it. So if I had joined the Swedish team, I would demand of myself to give it all, and I didn't know if I could do that.
Right.
But it was looking very promising, and it was top tier competition, and that could have been some sort of Scandinavian top team, but
Sure.
yeah, we never got around to it, and I declined the offer and created what would eventually be H2K. But yeah, I think at one point in all of those names within the H2K realm, we actually did make some roster changes, but it was kind of half-assed, to be quite honest. So I'm a loyal guy. I if people do right by me, I do it the
Right.
same way around them. So we've come to an agreement with one player that he stepped down, and we got another one in just to give it a last run, and that's basically as harsh as it goes for me.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not for booting players and stuff like that. Yeah, I believe if you set a team, obviously something can happen along the lines where you need to make some switches and stuff are not working, and you can have personality clashes and all types of stuff. But then you talk about it man to man, and then you figure out what's the next step here. I'm not about that booting and bringing in and trying someone else and then booting them, and because as I said, I believe in foundation, and I see it with the teams today. Obviously, there's the transfer stuff going on, which wasn't a part of our day-to-day Counter-Strike life. But you don't ever get settled on a team when you're switching every 2 months or 3 months, and people need to stop being such drama queens about it, and just just stick it up, and then fight for it, because you won't ever get that intense knowledge about one another if you keep on switching teammates out left, right, and centers. I know it's part of the game, and I know it's part of the contracts and the basic economics of Counter-Strike today, but I believe it's terrible for the team perspective of it. And I'm not saying you should stick with the same guys for the next 3 years, but at least give it half a year before you do any sudden changes. That's at least my mentality, because, for example, when we won ESWC, that's actually a funny story just here at the end. We had a bootcamp. We lost every single match on that bootcamp before ESWC, but it wasn't really a concern to me, because being on LAN is different than playing online games. And if you believe in the foundation and the strategies that you have, even though you're losing some scrims, if you believe in the fundamentals of stuff, then it should be working. That goes back to keeping the same roster a little bit. You won't ever get to the fundamentals, like really gritty fundamentals, if you keep switching out players. And then I also believe that the people are tending. I still read interviews and stuff like that. It doesn't take much before people get butthurt today. It took a little bit more back in the day. Obviously, there wasn't as many options either, but yeah, stick it up.
Yeah. Right at the end of this interview, KK, do you have a final message? Maybe you gave part of it there. Do you want to thank anyone or say hello to anyone?
No, just to thank a huge thanks to all of my teammates throughout the time and the competition. Pretty much, I mean, I think for most guys who've played professional Counter-Strike, we still have a look-sees sometimes, and even perhaps playing a little bit ourselves. So just thanks for some great times, and kind of also forced a little bit on how I am today with my job and stuff like that. I mean, that also goes back to who I was as a Counter-Strike player.
Tusind tak.
Ja. Tusind tak, og tusind tak for interviewet.
Everyone needs a support network, and mine is, of course, my Patreon community, the Scruminati, who, in many ways, they're the Sonny to my Cher, saying, I got you, babe. So this video and all the others on my channel were kindly supported by the following names: Ahmed Haju, Mac Pugnaccio Rakula, Adam Tomlin, Animosity, Jensen Go, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Jerky's Minion, my main man, always going to be referenced, one of the best patrons of all time. Would you like to ask a question in my AMA? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest to say on my channel? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming Reflections and Talk to Thorin interviews are? Maybe you want to do one of those long discussions where you get to set the topics we talk about. Well, if any of these or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.